Hey guys, Jess from Curse here. I'm here with Paul from ZeniMax Online. He's going to tell me a little bit about the Elder Scrolls Online, which I just had the pleasure of playing for the first time ever. So first of all, I was just completely blown away. It was fantastic. The first thing I have to say is, did you know that you were setting out to create Skyrim, the MMO?
Yes. I mean, obviously it's a huge inspiration. We're all big Skyrim fans, but when we really started out, we were thinking, the most important thing is to make it a fun RPG. And we wanted to make sure that we brought in familiar Elder Scrolls elements and then familiar MMO elements, but really trying to get a great blend where it's really something that Skyrim players can get into just right away.
Yeah, I did notice that it was very similar to Skyrim, and one of the main criticisms I heard about Testo so far is that it's nothing like Skyrim, and it's just confusing because I did not find that to be the case. Do you have any idea why that's something that someone might have said about it?
It's hard to say why people will say certain things, but my opinion is that if you sit down and you play the game, you're gonna find out that it is an Elder Scrolls game, just right away. And so I think maybe sometimes the people who haven't played it kind of make assumptions about things, but yeah, it's hard to say why people would say something like that.
Now I wanted to get into some of the specific gameplay elements I noticed. First of all, I noticed that it was interesting, I'd say not unusual, but interesting controls for an MMO in that they were more like the Elder Scrolls controls rather than MMO controls. Now, can you speak on that? Was that an intentional choice to make it feel more like the Elder Scrolls than like an MMO?
Absolutely. I mean, that was part of it. The other part is that we wanted to get rid of a lot of the UI elements, so hopefully when you got in, you notice it was really clean. And we want people looking into the world because that's the major point of engagement. And that's kind of what draws you into the fiction and things like that. We didn't want people just to bypass everything. Oh, I don't care what that NPC says, right? We want you drawn into the world. So actually those controls really kind of fit that mechanism of, okay, I don't want to have 40 different shortcut bars on the screen and everything else. We want you just to be able to get in, control the camera the way you want to, and just really enjoy the game.
Yeah, and that's another thing I noticed is that it was sort of hard to tell who was an NPC and who was a real player. And also the fact that we all had, a first name and a last name, so did the NPCs. That was really cool. And then something that was challenging for me was the fact that it was pretty seamless between in combat versus out of combat. For instance, I was talking to an NPC and then I had apparently aggroed a mob who came up and all of a sudden I was in combat and there was no indicator saying that I was except for the mob attacking me.
Right. Yeah, the idea again is to get that line of where it's really immersive. And so, if you're talking to another NPC and somebody comes up and attacks you, it's going to pull you out of that conversation, just let you know, hey, there's something bad happening right now and you need to take care of it. But then you'll be able to, once you defeat that mob, hopefully, then you'll be able to get right back into the conversation at that point.
Going back to kind of comparing it to Skyrim, it didn't seem like there was anything I could steal. Everything was just kind of there for me to take. Like, what's stopping me from taking 100,000 loaves of bread?
Yeah, so one of the challenges of bringing something online like this is that you want to be careful not to break somebody else's experience that's playing right next to you. And stealing, the thing about it is it's something we're absolutely looking at, but first we want to make sure that we get down pat the world interactivity model. And so when you see development, that's kind of one of the stages of it. And so right now you can't take things, but it's one of those things that we're looking at to where how do you add a justice system in that makes sense, it's really engaging to players, and maybe players can participate in something like that. So it's really important for us to first get down that world interactivity model though.
And will that bring with it pickpocketing as well?
That is to be determined, so we'll see about that later.
Oh, in terms of going back to the combat, targeting, I noticed that you could hit tab to log onto your target. Is there any way to self-target though if you want to? So I cast a healing spell once when I was walking by another player and I healed them. What if I had wanted to heal myself and that guy was just standing there? How do I specifically target myself?
So you won't need to target yourself. So that healing spell actually did heal you. You probably were full of health already. So it automatically heals in a radius for that particular spell. Okay. So that's really easy. Also, the tab targeting is just there. It's not actually a lock in the traditional sense because you have to be facing them. But if you have two mobs that are right in front of you like this and you want to hit the mob that's behind, sometimes that gets a little tricky for players. So we added a feature that allows them to say, no, that's the mob I really want to hit, because we don't want them to have to worry about being so precise that it turns the game off for them. So it's just something to aid players, but if you're not looking at that mob that's locked, you're not going to hit it. So you absolutely have to be, hovered over them to actually hit them.
Okay. Now, I've heard that there are 3 factions in Tesso, which is interesting coming from a, standard SWTOR, WoW, etc. They all have, it seems, 2 opposing factions. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so part of that is that we don't want a huge faction to just win and have overwhelming odds. So 3 factions is really interesting because then you have cases where if 2 factions are kind of falling behind one faction, they tend to, gang up on the other faction and kind of even the odds out. And so that's the interplay that, we think is pretty exciting for the game.
For traveling, is there any sort of fast travel system in the game?
There's lots of fast travel mechanisms. So what we have just starting out, if you're just starting out, we have way shrines. And way shrines, you can go to different way shrines, and once you visit a way shrine, you can always travel back to that way shrine.
With a hefty price tag, I notice.
There is a little bit of a price tag, but if you go from way shrine to way shrine, it's free.
Okay.
If you just go to your map and then you want to recall back to a way shrine, you can do that, and then there's a charge to that, which you saw. Mm-hmm. And also later on, we will have horses in the game and mounts, so there will be another fast travel mechanism.
That was going to be my next question. Now, when you die, I notice you can either revive where you are or you can revive at a way shrine. What's really the difference? Is there a benefit to one or the other? Is there a cost?
Yeah, so what you're actually seeing is, again, that's one of those in development things. And so the death system is something that we have to be really careful about, getting enough of a penalty to where it stinks, where you don't want to die, and then making it so it's not frustrating. The way shrine will probably stay there, but we're altering our death penalty just a bit, and we'll have more details on that later.
Awesome. And then finally, because I can't believe I didn't know this before, I thought this was free to play, but I don't know where I got that. Have you guys announced if it's going to be free to play or subscription based?
We haven't announced our business model yet.
Okay, great. Well, that's all the questions I had. Paul, thank you so much. Once again, I'm Jess from Curse. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the game.